Hi, Sparkles. How you doing? Oh, how's the video okay and everything and the audio? Hi, Mason. Good to see you. So, sound okay? Video all right? No buffering or any problems like that? Okie doke. That's good to hear. Thanks a lot. Thanks, Sparkles. Hi, Truman. Um, what I want to talk about this afternoon, this morning we talked about sort of favorite ones we have. We go out looking for a watch, and well, I'm going to look at these watches, and I had some that I always sort of like to look at. I mentioned Daniel Roth and Roger Dubuis, and I explained why I liked them. But the what I found out is that they're how do you find them in the first place? I mean, how do you find out a a watchmaker or even or a brand really is an outstanding one? Now, of course, there's rumors and so on and so forth that are sort of groups that surround a certain brand and sort of claim it's the best one in the world. Uh, and Yeah, that's one way to do it. On the other hand, though, these brands sometimes get so expensive because of the number of people who want to get them. Um, the instead of buying a watch or wanting to buy a watch based on the horology and perhaps something that you like about it, you're getting it because it's popular, and that becomes very expensive. Um, because it's pretty much a supply and demand. When you have a even with a large supply, if you have a demand high enough, you're going to get it. So what I like to do is to find out as much as I can about a watchmaker, where they came from, what were they involved with, and so forth, and and then go from there and see if there's something around there that is affordable. Let me give you an example. When F.P. Jorn and Vianney Halter and one other guy now whom are super famous, the guy who runs De Bethune, uh, they formed a little group called THA. I forgot what it stood for. I've got it written down somewhere, but not at my hand. So anyway, there was a movement that they had done, that THA had done for Cartier, and it was with a mono pusher that Cartier had from early in the 20th century. I saw it. I looked at the movement. It was didn't look like anything else Cartier had, because Cartier at the time was primarily using ETAs and less expensive movements. And why in the world they hired THA, I don't know. But since that time, that watch has become very valuable. But when I first saw it and was poking around, it was like a bargain. The problem was I wasn't crazy about the watch for different reasons. But the point is that it had some really fascinating horology in it, and I knew it was that for two reasons. One, I had read about THA and how it was formed, and second of all, simply look at the movement. So you can find a lot of things by looking sort of beyond your nose, so to speak. Um, let's see what hi, Thomas, how you doing? Watch Mike, watch Mike do. Hi from Phoenix, Arizona. Dominic, hi. Um, Junior, hey, Canadian Watch Monkey, Hobby. Good to see you guys. John, Paul. Hi, Paul. Twice in a day. Remind me to get a life. Remind me to get one. Hey, Brian. Hi, Tim. Rancher is good to see you, Rancher. Um, well, anyway, so and talking about how you going about looking for these things, to a great extent, it's simply finding out knowledge about watchmakers and what they're up to and where they came from. Some of the early works that was done by Roger Dubuis, uh, he and Jean-Marc Viderec used to work together and Harry um, for Harry Winston. This is before Harry Winston was bought by Swatch, and God knows what Swatch is going to do with him. But the thing of it was that the good part, at least for a collector, for me, was that you could find some really great deals on Harry Winston because most people would look at Harry Winston and say, "Oh, that's a fashion watch." Well, truth of the matter was it wasn't. This one in particular is a bi-retrograde, and it's got retrogrades, a retrogrades day and a retrograde seconds. You can probably even see that second coming down on where's my second? Is over here, and then it'll pop up. You see, it just pops up back to the top again. Okay, so I saw this and I thought, wow, that's really an interesting thing. I wonder what that came from. And somebody said, "Oh, I heard that that Vitarek was involved with it, and he did a lot of stuff with retrograde." So I contacted Agenor and got some very interesting information back. And so, telling me all about it and sending me the diagram for the retrograde. And then on the back part, the movement. Now, the movement was one. It turns out to be a very popular movement by really top-notch watchmakers, and that is a Girard-Perregaux. I think it's 3,000, and then 3,000 this and that and so forth. Um, and so these are like little clues to look for. You find a who did that movement, who did anything like that, and then follow it up like it's just sort of like a like a dog trying to find a truffle. Also, look in corners where others have overlooked. Yeah, this is the big thing. Hi, Mark. The big thing is that you have sort of, I hate to call them gangs. uh, it was not quite that organized, but they're sort of fanboys of certain brands. They love Panerai, they love Rolex, they love this, they love that, and they're sort of talking to each other, and and sort of convincing one another that that was really a good watch. And I'm sure that some of them are. I have no doubt about that. On the other hand, uh, they're not even. I mean, they're totally clueless about all this other stuff that's going around outside of their little world. Now, this can cut both ways too. I mean, you don't want to be a snob about any watch. I still think that the Rolex Prince, which was dropped, is a wonderfully good watch. And for a long time, nobody was looking there. And the way I found it was that the Horological Society of New York had these weekend courses where you would basically, it was sort of an introduction to watchmaking, but it was like a sort of an intense one. And we ended up taking a watch apart. I mean, taking it down to everything and then putting it back together again. And during that time, the guy who was running the class had a Prince, and I talked to him about it. He told me this is a wonderful watch, and it's one of the few watches, first of all, by Rolex that was hand wound, which is sort of like something I really like. and also it was I think it was at the time, it may have been their only shape movement, and it was just a great shape movement in that. So you can find it. So people say, "Well, I don't want to have anything to do with Rolex. They're a bunch of whatever." But it's a good place to look. You should look everywhere. Same thing with Omega and some of these other ones. Sort of a fertile ground I found is sort of a lot of the pre silicon stuff. There are a lot of watches that Patek Philippe has that they still had after they went to silicon, and so you find these pre-silicon ones, and you can find some really great watches. The deals may not be quite as good because of Patek Philippe's, and people are buying them on reputation. So anyway, let me go through some stuff that I found. Hi, Tim. Um, yeah, that's it. Hey, Mike. Turf War, right? Hey, Tuna. Um, the Cellini Prince is a great watch. Yeah, yeah. Um, hey, hey, Hamburg. How you doing, man? Okay. Truman. Uh, looked at rose gold prints. Okay, we got off on princes now. I love princes. They're great watches. By the way, too, I think all princes are precious metal. I think they're either white gold or yellow gold or rose gold. So that's another aspect to them. Okay, some of the ones that I was like to sort of drill down into. One was Daniel Roth, and the trouble with Daniel Roth is his watches were made in sort of different kinds of situations. The first one was when he was working for Breguet. The second one was when he started his own watch company, and so it was. Let me see. He went from Breguet to in let me see, 94, 2000. I think. Oh yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to think who he was. He was sort of he was working for himself between about 1988 and 1994. But I think there was some sponsor, and then in 1994, the Hourglass sort of became the sponsor, and then in 2000 they went bankrupt. But what I found was that at these different levels, different things were happening. When he first left um, Breguet because the Chomet brothers went broke, they went bankrupt and almost went to jail. That was when he started his own. I'm trying to think who the owner was at the time. I mean, the one he was working for, and something happened to them, and so forth. But between 1988 and 1994, he was pretty much on his own. And the watches that he developed in were some of the most interesting um, Daniel Roth watches, and they were largely made of gold and platinum. So, okay, then the whoever owned them then couldn't own them anymore. Forgot what I'm not sure what it was, but so the Hourglass, which was a Singapore company, they bought them, and what they wanted to do, or they bought the Daniel Roth. What they wanted to do was to um, make them more popular. And a way to make them more popular was to have more sports watch type of watches. And to do that, what they did, they took the existing watches and they would made a lot of them out of steel and did some other things to them that were like I said, they try to make them more popular. I don't think they were too successful. I mean, when you consider what they were up against, I mean, in a watch buying market, it was huge. So uh, finally, Then his company had to be, then Hourglass sold everything, including Gerald Genta, who wasn't even part of that. And about, I think it was about in 2000. And let's see. Um, Bulgari, they picked up the Daniel Roth and Gerald Genta, and they made them sell all of their stock to Bulgari. And Bulgari had their own sort of agenda, how they wanted things. And it's sort of like there was bound to be unhappiness. So after a year, Daniel Roth left them and was off on his own. Um, okay. So those are, I mean, so not only do you want to, I mean, to find really the sort of look under the rocks and the rocks underneath the rocks, it's important to take a look at the time. I mean, what's going on in the watchmaker's life. Uh, Rancher just pointed out that the Roger Dubuis, oh no, I mean Daniel Roth retrogrades are starting to get reasonable again, and by getting reasonable, that means people can't sell them because ones that they're used to buying, like Rolexes and Omega and sort of the usual suspects that watch collectors and watch buyers buy. So now they want to go back and they want to buy those again, and so you know, so that's how they become more reasonable. Um, Okay, Christopher Ward Bel Canto. I'm not familiar with that. I am familiar with Christopher Ward. I like them. Richard Bartlett say the really great thing about my channel. I thank you. Is unbiased opinion. Well, I have my biases. I mean, like I got to tell you, Richard. I don't think anybody doesn't know my opinion about having silicone hairsprings. So let me point that out. Um, the I think I don't know that's I think anybody talking about watches with a a video show or whatever they have has a point of view, and I certainly do. So mine is getting really good watches, but not having to pay a whole lot. Daniel Roth makes watch shapes not unlike an octagonal stop sign. He has something. Let me see. I'd written it down the name. It's called a double ellipse. This one has that double ellipse shape. It's not a radical version. This is the one I had on this morning. It's a Daniel Roth 24 Cities. Very unusual watch and one that I happen to like a lot. Um, I have another one, and this is something fairly typical of Roth and some of the other really top watchmakers who went out on their own and were making watches. They'd use other people's movements, not necessarily ETA, but sometimes ETAs. One of the popular ones, like I mentioned, was the Girard-Perregaux 3000. Uh, when I was getting this watch, there was one of the guys who worked at Girard-Perregaux who, excuse me, he went and got all this information about the movement they made for the Harry Winston. It's really cool. Really a great guy. Yeah, he's working at Audemars Piguet now, so but still, uh, trying to get that information if you can. Talk to people. A lot of people could care less about these sort of hidden gems as I'm calling them, and that's a good thing. They're more for me. Um, Rancher, a few years back, Don bought a 50 Fathoms. Oh yeah, Don. I know Don Don's story about his 50 Fathoms, but he got rid of it after a few months. You remember why? Looking after getting 50 Fathoms myself, want to make sure I'm not making a mistake. What I would look at with 50 fathoms, are they using, you know, it, there's nothing inherently wrong with silicone hairsprings. There are a number of things that are very good about them. The problem is that silicone hairsprings are sort of like saying, okay, I want to get I really want to deal with sort of what we might call an antique technology. But here's something, uh, or an antique furniture, but here's one that has a modern feature to it. And silicon, I mean, like quartz is simply silicon with oxygen. That's how you get quartz. But you cannot adjust the spring because it's made out of silicon. If you do, it'll break. And so this is one thing that takes it away from sort of what I would call traditional watchmaking. And that's what I got in the hobby for. I didn't get in the hobby for getting the very best timekeeper. Otherwise, I would have simply have an Apple smartwatch. So that's why my views of silicon hairsprings is such as it is. And so in talking about Mason's concerns about the 50 fathoms, is not because the silicon hairspring is bad, but rather because it is what it is, instead of being something for traditional watchmaking. There are some springs, some hairsprings, such as the Strawman hairspring, that have all of the characteristics of traditional hairsprings, plus the fact that they're virtually non-magnetic. So, um, Belcano sounds like a great name for an alarm watch. Ah, a Star Wars story. Okay, yeah, that too. Okay, what's going on? The CW Belcanto, they say it is a lot of watch for the money. Who is they and what do they say? Do they should say, well, it's got the SH-21 movement, which I happen to like, that was developed by Christopher Ward. Well, I don't know what that is, Rancher. Did Jenny Ellie totally ripped off Screen Pitch Channel? I don't know either one. They have some good information about watches. I'll look at it. Hey, Paul, the Christopher Ward Belcanto is a striking watch, strikes on the hour, looks like an MB&F for $3,000, albeit on a Salida. Worth Googling. Okay, thank you. Yeah. Okay. Parachrome as well. Yeah. Parachrome hairsprings. It's another thing. That's one reason that my opinion of Rolex went up 100%, because they were one of the three big companies that went ahead with to develop the silicon hairsprings, and then they decided not to use it in their general men's watches. They use it in, I think there's a women's watch they use it in. They've been using quartz in women's watches. All of the watchmakers have, because they're so small and they wanted to get a good, accurate uh, movement in some of these smaller women's watches. One watch that I really very, very recently have come to reappreciate is by Maurice Grossman. Now, the Maurice Grossman watches are like, they're very expensive for one thing, and I don't want to go on that. You can talk about any watch being very expensive. And they have a limited set of movements. But the thing about, I was looking at one of their movements, and I'm trying to remember which it was. I think it was something like the 100.300 or something like that. But boy, the size of the balance wheel, I really like big balance wheels. And that is something, the reason I like big balance wheels is that they have a greater stability, which is one constant force that you find in our issue of doing that. Vintage Harry Winston is proto MBNF. Yeah, yeah, that's a that's true. I never thought of it that way. Hey, Chris, Christopher Ward website says Bel Canto has a SOFS '01 chiming movement. Well, this will be interesting. One of the things, Brian, and I really haven't seen Christopher Ward do this, is they give phony baloney names to, like, they'll have an ETA in it, and they'll call it who does that? Breitling had some. It'll be a B movement. Um, Tudor. Tudor watches, if they're just a T movement, then it's ETA or Salida. If it's an MB for MT, wait a minute, is that it? MT? Manufacturer Tudor. Yeah, MT movement, that would be by Tudor. Hey, Pastor, how you doing? There are too many there are so many undiscovered out there. It's wise to have an open mind, or better said, open eyes. Both. Yeah, Pastor. Sean, that's a good point. Look at things and find out about them just because they're curious to be looked at. I mean, it's sort of like I was watching on TV before I started today. My wife and I were watching a show on crustaceans, and my God, the crustacean, it was just fascinating stuff, interesting things I never knew about crustaceans. And there's this one type of giant shrimp, I think. I think it was a shrimp or a lobster or something. I don't know what he was, but they only ate starfish. And so they had this this other crustacean munching on a starship's arm, and the starship was not starship, but starfish eating the starfish's arm. And so the announcer said, "Well, the starfish will just grow another one back." Which the way they said it is like, "Oh, go ahead, have an arm. I don't care. I'll just grow another one." So that's, I mean, the point is, I think that Sean made is a important one. You got to look at this just because it's interesting, and then you can. I mean, even if it's by serendipity, that's okay. Yeah, no. Hi, John. Nivercron hairsprings were used in ETAs before silicon. Yeah, it was made out of titanium. Yeah, John. You know who uses those are the Navicron hairsprings are also used by FP Jorn, and at least on mine it gets magnetized real quick because I think they have an alloy with it, or they used to. I don't, it's more than meets the eye. Um, it sits on a Salida SW200-1 base. Yeah, well, that's a then the thing of it is, Brian, is that where you have that, and this is what I like about Christopher Ward. Christopher Ward tells you, what's in there. They made it a little harder. You got to dig a little more into the watts. They used to have it right up front, but now they sort of like, if anything, it's not an SH. I think SH21. I think is their main in-house movement, but they use a lot of these other ones as well. But there's nothing wrong with Salida. Salida, and they have different grades of Salida, just like they did with ETA. Because you got to remember that Salida cloned ETAs primarily because ETA at one point was having such a hard time meeting its demand. It hired Salida, or contracted with Salida, gave Salida all of the information they needed to clone whatever was going to be cloned, and they did it. And then at some point, ETA decided, well, our SWAT decided, well, we're not gonna sell these to anybody else because we're just going to keep them for ourselves. And so Solida's out there with all of the business. And some Solidas are not very good. I took one apart and it stayed apart. That may have had to do with the what pretentious watchmaker that it had to do with the Solida, but they're okay. Maurice Grossman are really impressive. I like their watches, and I like what's her name, Christina Hutter. When I first met her, it was several years ago at one of the first Watch Time shows, and I saw this woman who looked like a local hire out there working with these watches and doing all this stuff and winding them up and everything. I found out later it was the CEO of Moritz Grossman. Yeah, no, they're really something. I like them a lot. Beauvais, yeah, I like Beauvais too. Beauvais, see what Beauvais did was they bought basically uh, everything they needed to create demi-air, which makes their movements and stuff. Oh, God. Okay. All right. I'll stop on this one. We're out of time. All right. Forbin Colossus. If you wear your Urban Jurgensen driving a minivan, is it a suburban Jurgensen? Oh, God. That is awful. Show me the Beauvais. Okay. All right, guys. Richard, thanks. Um, everyone, and let's go looking for good deals. Take care.